Ontario has become the latest battleground in the fight to change Canada's legal definition of marriage. Several same-sex couples began a court challenge today, arguing they should have the same right as heterosexuals to a marriage license. Norman Hermont reports.
I very happily pronounce you husband and wife. Congratulations.
It's a scene you can see almost every day in city halls across the country. And for couples such as this one, it's not just the ceremony that's important. So is the license that makes the marriage official.
I want it to be legal, legit, and for her to know that she's so special. We want the Ontario and everybody in the government to know that, to recognize us.
That is a recognition same-sex couples are still fighting for. The latest round in that battle was launched today in Ontario.
As long as the government refuses to do the right thing, we'll keep fighting.
I hereby declare them to be lawfully married.
Last January, a Toronto church married Joe Varnell and his partner, Kevin Bourassa, and another couple. But Ontario has refused to register those marriages. Now, for the first time, a church is looking to the courts to answer this fundamental question.
Whether that marriage, which is valid in the eyes of their church, the Metropolitan Community Church of Toronto, is a legal marriage under the laws of Ontario.
The Ontario Superior Court of Justice will also hear another legal challenge from couples such as Joyce Barnett and Allison Kemper. They're here because the City of Toronto refused to grant them a civil marriage license. That, says their daughter, is wrong.
This is just about showing everyone that we are just the same as any other family that you would see.
Up to now, courts across Canada haven't seen it that way. Last month, in a case involving same-sex couples in British Columbia, a court ruled that same-sex marriages were actually unconstitutional. In Nova Scotia, the province has started registering same-sex domestic partnerships, but they still have far fewer rights than legal marriages. Groups opposed to same-sex marriage say there is good reason the courts are moving slowly.
Children benefit when they're raised in a family that is with a man and a woman that are committed to one another. The two adults benefit from each other, and that society as a whole benefits.
Could be up to 6 months before the court has a decision, and whatever it is, it's almost certain to be appealed, first to the Ontario Court of Appeal, then perhaps to the Supreme Court of Canada. Norman Hermont, CBC News.
Morning and welcome to Newsroom Morning on Tuesday, November the 6th. I'm Mark Kelly. Coming up, we're going to hear about the latest by same-sex couples who are fighting for the right to get married and have that recognized by the courts. And making a link between softwood lumber and security. Well, the opposition leader stalking the Ontario Superior Court to change the marriage laws to allow them to get married. Now, to rate their chances of success, I'm joined by our legal commentator, Mike Fitzjames, also editor of Canadian Lawyer Magazine. Good morning, Mike.
Good morning, Mark.
Interesting case, because I've heard about this one. We saw this actually recently where they were going through marriage ceremonies. There was a lot of cameras were there who have watched this before. I thought that they were actually, these were legit, but in the eyes of the law, they aren't. So
they're not. Well, there's two parts. Right? They're asking the City of Toronto to issue marriage licenses. That's the first thing. And they're asking the government of Ontario to register religious marriages, which have already taken place. And both levels of government are refusing to do this because they say there's a common law definition of marriage which can only be changed by the federal government. That's the first thing. And of course, the applicants are saying, well, there's no laws out there that say that. And the city and the province say, well, that doesn't matter. We can't change the law. We have to go by what's called the common law definition of marriage. The common law definition of marriage says only a man and a woman can get married, not same-sex couples.
So it's interesting because in some of these cases, some of these couples have been married.
They have been married
but
in a church.
The law then doesn't recognize this marriage. It becomes more just a symbolic gesture.
It's not recognized. You can't get a license to either have it done in a church, and you can't get you can't get it registered with the province, which is of course one of the things which creates a legal marriage.
Now, someone here, and I'm just quoting one of the complainants here, who say. it's always frustrating when you have to struggle for your basic human rights and equal rights. So the idea here that there is some sort of discrimination in the law the way it's written.
This has all been before the courts before in BC about a month ago, and the judge there basically went through a checklist of charter rights that could possibly be offended by this denial of same-sex marriage. And he ticked everything off under the charter, and he found, yeah, there was a violation of equality rights. But under Section 1 of our charter, if it's reasonable, and he found it was reasonable to, in fact, have the common law definition because it's a very old thing. It goes back centuries and centuries.
Old doesn't mean good, though, Mike.
But
old just means
maybe
old.
It doesn't
make it right.
But it's very difficult to change. And in order to change it, and it has to be done federally, you'd actually have to have a constitutional amendment. And even if it does offend the charter, it's still reasonable, this BC judge found. And I have a feeling that's under appeal, but I have a feeling that's going to be upheld on appeal.
Okay, and now it was one thing that I found interesting, because what you're also arguing too on one level is that for the benefits that same-sex couples want that would be granted to traditional couples, that you can get most of them anyway.
Well,
right
there
now.
are plenty of common law benefits and same-sex benefits which are already enshrined in legislation. But second of all, if you want all the benefits and burdens for that matter of marriage, you can create them all by contract right now. You can sit down and craft a domestic agreement, and in some jurisdictions like Nova Scotia, domestic partnerships with domestic agreements are recognized almost the same way as marriages are. So provinces are slowly moving in that direction, but you can get all the benefits, and it doesn't seem to me that there's a major infringement of equality rights going on here. And I think people are not terribly impressed by the argument that merely because you can't call yourself married, you're suffering some kind of discrimination.
Just seeing in a report here, it says there's still some 100 laws where same-sex couples don't have the same rights as legally married couples. I mean,
there are laws out there, but they're slowly changing, and these laws can be challenged on an individual basis. But you cannot challenge the basic common law definition of marriage.
So if you want to do this, then you got to change the Constitution.
You've got to amend
right upstairs,
and you got to go up to the feds, because the feds have the power over what the basic definition of marriage is. This application will not succeed. If it does succeed, it'll be overturned on appeal. They haven't got a case because it's just too difficult to change it. It's too much of a political hot potato for the feds to change. So it won't happen.
Unless the feds do decide to take this one on, which...
Well, they'd have to get all the provinces to sign on. They'd have to pay the political cost of doing it, and there is a political cost to doing it, and I don't think it's going to happen. They're just going to have... They might have some provincial legislation which acts kind of another kind of a domestic partnership, which is not called marriage, but you can't call yourself married unless you're a man and a woman.
Okay, Mike. Case closed for now. Anyway, we'll be watching that one, and who knows, it'll probably wind its way up to the Supreme Court if the Supreme Court is so inclined to listen to this case. We'll be watching that.
Pam Seidel is live with more on the story on Queen Street tonight. Pam?
And at Osgoode Hall, just down the street from us here, federal government lawyers argue that the law defines marriage as the union of one man and one woman to the exclusion of all others. It's a definition that's infuriating those appealing the law.
We've got their lawyers coming into court straight-faced and saying it all comes down to genital plumbing, a penis and a vagina.
Well,
that's what it's all about.
Is this homophobia on the part of the federal
Absolutely.
government?
Beyond homophobia.
Michael Leshner's anger is fueled by a statement made in court today by counsel for the Attorney General, who said the institution of marriage would be gone if same-sex marriages were recognized in law. But outside court, she backtracked.
It would be changed. That's what I meant, and that's what I did say.
And what's wrong with that?
Well, it's not the same. It is not the same institution, because this institution is the institution of one man and one woman.
Fundamental to the institution of marriage, the AG argues, is the presence of three so-called goods and goals. They are the capacity for procreation, fidelity, and sacrament. And that's an argument, once again, that just doesn't hold water for many same-sex couples.
The proof is in our own wedding. We solemnized in a Christian tradition our wedding. Procreation is definitely a part of the gay and lesbian community, and increasingly becoming so. Fidelity, it's ludicrous to assume that those three pillars don't exist in all relationships.
The feds also argued today that Bill C-23, which was passed last year, should satisfy same-sex couples. It grants them benefits and therefore the respect they deserve while preserving the traditional institution of marriage. Live on Queen Street, I'm Pam Seidel. Now back to the news.